This video will cover exercise B2. In this exercise, you will learn to change space types, use a measure to create an HVAC and domestic hot water system, and apply the necessary settings in OpenStudio to run a simulation. You're going to start by opening your exercise B1 model in the SketchUp OpenStudio plugin. I've got mine open here. In step 1, we'll select the ground floor core space on the leg of the T and use the Attributes tool to change the space type. The Attributes tool is this one with a hammer and wrench. And we'll change the space type to ASHRAE 90.1 2010 office restroom. Select OK. And once we render by space type, we'll see that this space now appears as a different color from the others. That indicates that it's now a different space type. We could also look in our inspector to see what the space type is. And we can see that that is 90.1 2010 office restroom. In step 3, we're going to change the rendering back to by surface type. And we'll now select the top floor central core space on the leg of the T and open our inspector once more. Note here that no space type is currently selected. That's because it's inheriting this property from the defaults that are assigned under the facility menu. Here we're going to pull down and assign the space type Office Conference. And now once again, if I render by space type, I can see that the conference room space type has been applied. Space types are a way of defining default properties for things like internal loads, materials, and so forth, schedules, and so on in your model. These are an incredibly powerful and handy tool that can save you a tremendous amount of time in simulation once you understand how to set them up properly. I'm now going to save my OpenStudio file. I'll do a save as and name it something that makes sense so I can identify it later on. I'm now going to close the file by setting up a new file. I can choose yes or no because I've already saved the model. Say OK to that. And I'll switch over to OpenStudio, where I'll now open the file. I don't need to save because the default file doesn't have any useful information in it. I'm going to start by going to the HVAC menu, which is this square arrow returning here, just to verify that I don't presently have any HVAC systems in the model. It often takes this tab a few moments to open, so I'll wait while it does that. And I can see that I have nothing selected under refrigeration, VRF, and no other systems are listed. I inadvertently skipped step 5, but we'll go back and do that now. Next, we will, actually in step 4, we'll go back to the Measures tab and download the measures that we'll be using here. The measure you're interested in There'll be two of them. One of them is under HVAC whole system. It'll be called ASHRAE System 7 VAV Reheat. You'll download that. Then you'll navigate to Service Water Heating, then Water Heating, and AEDG Office SWH, which stands for Service Water Heating. And you'll download that. You'll then return to Open Studio after closing that window. I've already got those downloaded, but I'll show you what these two look like. First of all, we're looking for AEDG Office Service Water Heating, which is this one. And then under HVAC, whole system, ASHRAE System 7, where SYS is abbreviated VAV Reheat. This one is a standard ASHRAE 90.1 system that in some cases you're required to use to model a building of about this scale. At this point, I'm going to do a save as, so I can retain additional versions of my file in case I make a mistake and need to go back. And then I'll go to Components and Measures and select Apply Measure Now. It'll take this just a moment to load. When it does, I'm going to go select the HVAC measure I just downloaded and then select it, leaving the defaults applied. There we go. In some measures, I'll need to make various inputs down here. We don't have any ceiling return air plenums in our model, so I'm going to leave that blank, and I'm not worried about the cost, so I'm going to go ahead and apply measure. After it runs, it should tell me whether it's been successful in applying new systems to the model. Alright, it tells me it started with 0 air loops, 0 plant loops, and 0 zones condition. We finished with 3 air loops, 2 plant loops, and 30 conditioned zones. So it successfully applied the measure, created HVAC systems for 30 different zones, one for each floor of the building with 2 plant loops as part of this. So that's an amazingly powerful tool that will do that automatically for us. Next, we'll use the Apply Measure Now once more after I save as when this comes back. There we go. Once more, well, first I'm going to save as. Again, a new version in case I need to go back at some point. I'm going to select Apply Measure Now once more. And this time I'm going to select the water heating measure. In this case, you're going to refer back to the floor area you looked up in an earlier step and divide the total by 200 square feet per occupant. And you'll round up and enter that value for the total number of employees. In my example, I'm just going to make up a number. So service water heating, then water heating, AEDG office service water heating. Under total number of employees, I'm going to say 36, just for the sake of the demonstration. And then apply the measure. In this case, the measure just tells me that it succeeded, so I'm going to accept those changes. And then I will go to the HVAC tab and look at the systems that were created. This time I'm just going to save and then select the HVAC tab. All right, we can see that we've got now have a hot water loop, a chilled water loop, a surface water heating loop, which looks something like this, our hot water loop, and our chilled water loop. These are our plant loops, look like this. And then we have an HVAC loop, an air loop for each story, with all the zones being included. In this case, it's thermal zone 10 that we're seeing right here. All right, so it looks like we've been successful. I'm going to go back to the Site tab. If my weather file is not showing up right here, I would go to Change Weather File and select it. In this case, it's remained selected. And then I'm going to import design days by clicking on this button and then navigating to the same directory where I previously downloaded the weather file and select the companion file that ends in .ddy. This contains the sizing day data, which has now been included here. Next, I'm going to go to the Simulation Settings tab under the gear. Before I go on, let me explain what these are. So these are the conditions that the system is going to use, the simulation is going to use to size HVAC systems based on these near worst case conditions. These are the 0.4% conditions and 99.6% conditions. So this is saying that only 0.4% of the year will conditions exceed this cooling load, and only 0.4% of the year will the conditions exceed this heating load. I'll now go to the Simulation Settings tab and then click on Simulation Control. This is very important and easy to forget. I need to tell it I want to do the zone sizing calculation, do the system sizing calculation, and do the plant sizing calculation. So when it puts in all of these HVAC systems, it puts them in being auto-sized, which means the simulation, Energy Plus, will calculate what size those systems need to be, and then put in the proper size system when the simulation is run. This is a really good feature because it allows you to change the design of those zones and have the system automatically update the HVAC to match the sizing of the zones, to match the heating and cooling load on those zones. But it's going to have to run those sizing calculations every time. If we had a finished design that we were trying to simulate to measure actual performance of a building, we would go in and hard set all of those settings because we would know ahead of time exactly what size that equipment was. I'm going to tell it, in this case, not to run the simulation for the sizing periods. Those are those design days. But I do want it to run for the weather file run period. So by default, it's going to run for the entire year. I'm going to go back to the Measures tab once more. I'm going to go ahead and save a new version of my model just to be safe. I can see that I still have my OpenStudio results measure selected. Sometimes these measures won't stick if you've moved the file around, and you might need to reapply that. Then I'm going to go to the Run Simulation tab and run a simulation. It looks like the model is going to run successfully because I see it going through the sizing phases here, as well as warming up, and then starting the simulation and going through week by week. While that's happening, I'm going to go organize my files a little bit. So presently I have them saved on my desktop. These directories that get created along with the file can get very large very quickly. You'll see that once this one completes, the file size will get considerably large. So one good way to save space is to go through and delete all those for all the versions of the file that you had saved previously. Those can always be regenerated by rerunning a simulation. I want to make sure that I leave the one for the file that's actually simulating right now, so that'll cause a failure if I get rid of it. All right, that's finally completed. So I'm going to go to show simulation, look at my error file, see what it has to tell me. All right, I got a whole bunch of warnings here. Looks like a lot of them have to do with some schedules. Schedule type limits are missing since we used scripts primarily to create this file. That's not going to be a problem. We didn't have ground temperatures input, so it's going to read the defaults. That's okay in this case as well. There's some unused items that doesn't affect us. And then it's giving us some warnings about the airflow on some of these indoor terminals. By and large, it looks like this stuff isn't anything too important. There are no severe warnings, obviously no fatal warnings. So I think at this stage we'll be satisfied with that simulation. The last couple of steps in recording the data are very similar to what you've done in exercise A and B1 so far. So you can repeat those, gather your data, and then record it for the class.